Welcome, my beautiful people. I am so glad you're here. I am Donielle, and I am bringing you wine, crime, and mystery chronicles. And last week we talked about the Menendez brothers, and I was really amazed at the value of how the value changed. Not necessarily in the home where the parents were murdered, but in the house that they were renovating at the time of their death. How the value decreased. And today the value is like on par, but back then it had decreased even though it had not. No one had been murdered on it. I'm still looking for an appraiser or someone to tell me why did that happen. I mean, of course you can guess a few things, but I'm very interested in hearing an expert's opinion. And so this channel just doesn't just speak about crime and murder and mystery. We have some type of real estate aspect in it. Hence why we're talking about today's story, which is regarding the real estate heiress Tiffany Lee, who allegedly murdered her boyfriend, well, her ex-boyfriend, the father of her kids. And so we will get right into that shortly. Last time in the last video, I didn't share the wine that I was drinking at the time, and so I decided to drink the exact same wine and to share a little bit about it earlier before I get way into the video, because after I get in the video, I've had a couple sips of this and I totally forget at the end. So we are drinking Southern Red from Lake Ridge Wineries and Vineyards here in Southern California, in Florida, up in the Claremont area. They have a wonderful winery there. It has like a muscan. I don't know if I'm saying it right. Muscan grape. It's a little very distinct grape. Usually, if I have a wine that has this type of grape in it, I automatically correlate that to Lake Ridge, because it's just a very distinct taste, and so it's really good. The red wine is one of my favorites. I really like a lot of their wines, but the red wine is one of my favorites. They had another one that my father-in-law let me taste not too long ago that was really good, so I may show that on the channel one time. But let me take a quick sip before we get started talking about Mr. Green. Yes, that is really good. So, Keith Green, he was very popular. They say that he was troubled. He was a football star. He took his team into a championship, what helped him get a scholarship to college. He lived in a nice blue collar neighborhood, and when he was much younger, his parents divorced. And so once he had got into college, he decided that he was going to drop out. I'm not exactly sure why he dropped out. I don't know if because he had got into a little trouble where it was like some petty theft and some issues with some gift cards. And so I'm not exactly sure if that happened before he left college or after he left college. But granted, it was just little petty things. Young people, they get in trouble, and that's what it was. But it was on his record. And so but nevertheless, his high school coach said that he was a tremendous athlete. And not only did he play football, he also played basketball and baseball. And that he also said that he was funny and very popular, and a lot of people liked him, which I'll touch on a little when I talk about Tiffany, about him being so popular and people liking him a lot. But after he dropped out of college, he drifted from job to job. And even after he passed, this kind of shows some of someone's character, because after he passed, a year after he passed, the anniversary of his death, they said 50 or more people showed up for his for his, like a memorial for him. And so that's very telling about a person, because sometimes you can barely get 50 people to show up for a funeral, let alone to come a year after someone has passed, right? And so yeah, that was his life, and that's, at that time, that's who he was. And so Tiffany, the real estate heiress, she had money. Her parents had money. They had some real estate. They had a lot of real estate deals, and so they were big into the real estate. They started in real estate in China, and then they started buying properties here in the U.S. And I'll touch on that towards the end of the story to tell you more about her family and their history. But Tiffany went to several different private schools, elite private schools, and she even ended up going to a boarding school. And she had her master's degree, and she was just like one of those jet-setting women who knew they came from money and used their money and showed it, more so than her mother or her parents. And her mother paid her $100,000 a year just to kind of manage her real estate holdings. And so that's what Tiffany did as a job. She managed her mother's estate, and plus her mother also gave her plenty of money to live. So let me go a little bit into their story, just to kind of, I wanted to tell you about the two of them, to kind of give you a little background on them. But the couple's story began in 2009. Lee met Keith. Tiffany met, it was like, am I going to call him Lee and Green? I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to call them by their first name, last name. So you may see me interchange them in this video. But she met him in 2009. He was 21 and she was 23. And they just quickly decided to move in together. And the first place they moved into was an apartment that was owned by her mother. And then shortly after that, they moved into a newly built home that was $7 million in an exclusive San Francisco suburb. And Tiffany gave birth, Tiffany, Green, Keith, all of it, right? So Tiffany and Keith gave birth to a daughter in 2012. They gave birth to their second daughter 2 years later. And so their home was staffed with what you would expect from people with money. They had nannies, they had chefs, they had landscapers. They would pick and buy these exotic cars. He liked tattoos, she liked plastic surgery. So practically, what many people had said, that she totally changed his life. He went from this person who was working job to job and couldn't get a real job because he had these little petty crimes on his record. And so she totally transformed his life and brought him into money and gave him things that he wouldn't have had otherwise. And so, they were fine. When we go a little bit into the story of them, when they talk about Lee and, what her family thought about him, her mom left some comments about him that she didn't really like him. She thought, she said that at the apartment building that they lived in, she told the police detectives that he had, when it came to Tiffany's parents, well, at least her mom, because they didn't really speak much about her dad or her stepdad, because it was, her mom and stepdad were together, so they didn't talk much about the men in her life, at least her two dads, her stepdad and her dad. But when it came to her mom really didn't like Green. She told the detectives that, that he wasn't a good guy, that he was growing marijuana out of one of the bedrooms in the apartment, the first apartment that they lived in. So she told them that he had grown marijuana in one of those bedrooms. And she also said that, you know, he drank and he smoked marijuana. He drank and he smoked marijuana, which got him fired from a construction job he had. And she had a real issue that he lost that construction job. She called him and she considered him like her words exactly was the black hole of the family. And so I associate that with maybe like the black sheep, but the hole is really deep, okay? But nevertheless, even though, you know, she had her feelings towards him, she still footed the bill, a $40,000 per year bill for him to go to Cordon Bleu, so that he can become a chef. And, you know, you look at it, parents want the best for their kids, and so I kind of associated that she wanted him to do good so that it would be reflective on her daughter, since her daughter was with him and she was having kids with him. But, you know, even though she had all these unsavory things to say about him, you know, other people that was in his life didn't feel that same way about him. They knew a different person, and they was like, I don't know this person that she's talking about. And so another thing that I'll mention really quickly is that when Tiffany was talking to the detectives also, she had some type of issue with, you know, Keith being so super friendly. Oh my goodness, you know, he'd go anywhere and he just would pick up people, all sorts of people. And so, you know, I associate with them being, because I know people like that, they can go anywhere and they will meet people like strangers and they like, oh, this is my peeps, this is somebody I've known for a long time. So I gathered that was the type of character that he was, and she didn't like it because she was like, I keep my friend, I have close knit friends. I don't, you know, just meet a bunch of strangers. You know, that's just my heiress, how I figured that an heiress would talk. Right? And so, you know, I saw she had some issues with that. And, you know, she had accused him with talking to the detectives that he had cheated on her. So I think she associates his friendliness and his outgoingness with him cheating. But again, so it's like the pot kept calling the kettle black. Is that right? Should I be saying that word? I don't know. But anyways, so the friendly guy that Mr. Green was, he was out at a club with Tiffany. They're hanging out at a club together, and he runs into one of his friends. And his friend, Kaveh, his name is Kaveh Bayat. Kaveh Bayat. I swear, I hope I say it right through this video. Kaveh Bayat. So Kaveh Bayat was his friend. They were cool. They had some other mutual friends and they knew each other. Well, they're at the club and he introduces Lee to Kaveh. He introduces Lee to Kaveh, and she's like eyeing him, and she's like, he looks nice. And he like, I know that's that chick that got all that money. And so after they left the club, Lee, Miss Tiffany, the heiress who keeps her close-knit friends who don't like all of these unsavory people that Keith picks up, she found a way to contact Kaveh and told him that, you know, showed her interest in him, of how she liked him. And he was like, you know, I'm not going to be your side piece or your side man on the side. Side man on the side. I'm not going to be your side piece. And so he was like, if you want all of this, because she liked him, he was like, had this like bad boy, had these tattoos on his neck and everything. She was like, he said, if you want all of this, then you got to get rid of Keith. I'm not going to be in competition with Keith. Keith got to go. And sure enough, in October 2015, she sent Keith an email and told Keith that she no longer wanted to be with him and that he needed to leave. Yes, she was like, I want him over there. You gotta go. I don't care if I had kids with you, but you have to go. So, in a way to get Keith to agree to this situation, because look, what I'm gonna do? You just want to leave me out in the cold for this guy that was my friend? He was my friend, and you want to just leave me? So she offered to give him $4,000 a month to also put the car that he had into his name so that he can be the full owner of that car. And they say, some say, I read many places that said it was like $40,000. Then I read somewhere else that said it was like $100,000 car. But in the San Francisco area, and because, in the interview with investigators, Lee was telling them, she was kind of mentioning in some side conversation that one of her friends lived in her apartment building that her mom owns, and it was a low income place, and that she allowed her friend to live there. And so the detectives asked her, oh, so how much is the low income, apartment? And she tells them it's $2,200. And so they like look at each other's side at like $2,200 is low income. Then how much is the regular, place to stay? And she like $5,000. So in hindsight, her giving him $4,000 a year is not a lot. And he just really wanted to live the lifestyle, or not necessarily live the lifestyle, but have some of the lifestyle so that when his girls came to visit, it wouldn't be like, oh, my dad lives in trash, my mom is living here, and my dad lives here. So he wanted to be able to live a better lifestyle than he could provide for himself. But granted, she only paid him the $4,000 once because she mentioned it to a girlfriend or her mother. And they were like, don't be giving him $4,000, don't give him nothing. And so she only paid him once. And so, he was struggling. He was struggling to make ends meet, to make ends meet. And so, and so now she has kicked Green out of the house, and her boyfriend Kaveh has moved in. Green is now living in a 1-bedroom apart place with a friend of his. People say that she wasn't allowing Green to see the kids, so he went and filed for custody. After a real big custody battle, they finally agreed that Green could gradually retain 50% custody, starting with, I think they had some supervised visits, but now they were going to go to unsupervised visits. And the first weekend that the visit was supposed to start was going to be April the 30th of 2016. But Green disappeared 2 days before that even happened. And so what was said is that, and so the first weekend that was supposed to occur was April the 30th of 2016. But Green disappeared 2 days before that date. And Tiffany, Miss Lee, the Miss Heiress of the real estate fortune, was the last person who was seen with him. And so, one second, let me get a drink really quickly. So I mentioned that Tiffany was the last person to see Keith Green alive. And it was because she had a meeting with him. She had convinced him to come and meet her at the Pancake House, and they sat in her car for an hour to talk about custody of the kids. And so at that time he mentioned, And it's weird because she would randomly record him at instances. Like, she recorded him when he was saying that he was going to move to Ohio because he could no longer afford to live in San Francisco, so he was going to move somewhere where the cost of living wasn't as high. And so, you know, she says that after they had their conversation, he got out of her car and then she drove off, and then they don't know what happened to him. And so she was the last person to see him. So she saw him on April 28th. And April 29th, a hiker found his phone. Right? So now we have Keith Green is missing and what happened to him. On May the 4th, so that's a couple of days after the phone was found. So the detectives, I'm sure in between there is doing their work. I'm sure they asked her some questions. At that point, up until that moment, she was really not a suspect. So they bring her in just to kind of talk to her, to get her story of what happened and who's these people and who is this and who is that. So they did a whole questioning of her. But one of the things that, you know, so they made her go over her story, and they're asking her, so can you tell us again in your own words what happened? And she'll go in and she'll say, yeah, so we met, we sat in my car for an hour, we talked, and we had a decent conversation. We went our separate ways, and I went home, right? And so the detectives are like, well, that's very interesting, because, so you're saying that Keith didn't get in the car with you? He didn't go to your house? And she's like, no, he didn't go to my house. My man is at the house. Like, what? She didn't say that. I'm just kind of ad-libbing it. My man is at the house. Why would he come to my house? And my man there, and they don't even like each other like that, because I slept with my man. I slept with his friend and kicked him out and moved him in. She didn't say that, but that's what I was thinking in my head. And so, but she was like, no, no, he didn't come home with me. I went home by myself. And so they said, that's very interesting, because we, you know how they have that GPS thing? And she was like, yeah, I know about GPS. And it was like, he had that on his phone. And she was like, oh, he probably had that on his phone because his girlfriend wants to know where he is at all times. And it was like, yeah, possibly. But there was like, we were able to take and track where his phone went, you know, once you or him left this parking lot of the Pancake House. And they said it was pretty interesting, because it looks like when you left, his phone left with you. You went to your house. You got to your house. When you left your house, you went down 1800 Street. The car went down 1800 Street with you. It followed a little behind you, but it went down 1800 Street behind you. And then you stopped. You went to your friend's apartment building. You left, and the phone stayed there. After that, the phone drives to the Golden Gate. The phone goes to the Golden Gate. You go home, but the phone goes to the Golden Gate. Was you sure Keith wasn't with you? Wait. She like, She was like, so you saying that it's possibility that somebody was following me? Should I be worried? And I'm thinking to myself, no, you should not be worried. And so they questioned that on her, and then she like, it's very suspicious. Yeah, I find that's very, very weird. He was like, so we took your phone, and we kind of matched it up with his, and it kind of showed the same thing. So it shows that he was in your car when you went home. And she was like, no, he wasn't in my car. He didn't go home with me. And it's like, All right, so they went on and they questioned her and questioned her, and at that point, they took her phone for however long. They went to her house. They searched her house, um, and they did all of that. You know, they did all their work and they're doing their research to trying to figure it out of what happened. So, you know, they questioned her about, you know, everybody that's in her house. You know, you have a nanny, you have a cook, who stays in the house. She mentioned that, you know, Kaveh has a bodyguard, Olivier, and you know, she just, you know, kind of described everybody. So there's Keith that lives in the house. That's his her. It's the nanny. Is the chef that lives in the house, and occasionally Olivier would come in, who is come into the house and do mixed martial arts with them. He was also Kaveh's bodyguard. And so 2 weeks after the cops interviewed her on on May the 4th, somebody who was just walking in the area of where the, like, north of the Golden Gate Bridge where his phone was thrown, they found his body and it was badly decomposed. After they did an autopsy, they had found that there was a bullet hole that went straight through the back of his head, whereas a gun was put into his mouth and he was shot like that. Devastating. What a horrible way to die, you know. And so cops doing their work, their research, and they come to find out that Kaveh and Olivier had bought these burner phones. And when they traced these burner phones, they went and they arrested Olivier because just based on the phone records, they went and they arrested him. And so, and Olivier started talking and talking. He cooperated with the cops. And when they arrested him, they found $35,000 of money in like in a gym bag or something in his home. So it's like, did you get paid to do this? Like, what's going on? And so he spoke. He said that his story, you know, when I first initially heard him talk about this, his story was slightly different than a television interview that I heard. And so what Olivier had said was that she met with Keith at the Pancake House, as was told. She convinced him to come back to her house. At that time, Kaveh came out, got in the car, or he got out. He puts this gun in his mouth and shoots him. They put Keith's body in Lee's vehicle, her truck, and they takes it to, which, remember that pattern, how they left the Pancake House, went to her house, then they went down 1800 Street. They went to Olivier's home. Olivier said when they got there that Keith came in, showed him on his waistband, and said pretty much like, now you need to do your thing, and which was meaning, we need you to get rid of this body. And so he said that him and Keith removed Keith's clothes because it was a way that he wanted to humiliate Keith even after death, which I thought was pretty sick. He wants to humiliate him even after death. And so they took off his clothes, they put him in, and they said the whole time, he said the whole time Lee was there, Tiffany was there watching this occur. So they put him in Olivier's car, and then he drives, and then he dumps Keith's body. Shortly, so that was that story he told. And so he told this to prosecutors so that he can try to get a lighter sentence. So he tells them this story. They go in and they go and arrest Kaveh, and this story is so wild. It has so many intricacies. So I'm hoping that I'm getting it all down. Because, so they go and they arrest Kaveh and Lee and put them in jail. Kaveh remained in jail, but Lee, the heiress that she is, her family and her family's friend came together. They put together like $4 million in cash, and they put together like $60,000 of real estate funds together, because in California, when you're using real estate for bail, it has to be double. So even though, you know, they said $4 million, then $60,000 and $60 million in real estate, I've heard numbers from, you know, the 64 to 66 million that she posted, which was the highest bill that has ever been posted in California's history. And so Kaveh's in jail, Olivier's in jail. He's singing like a songbird, and she is at home on house arrest. It took literally 3 years before they even went to trial, right? So they didn't even go to trial right away. It took 3 years for them to even go to trial. So in the meantime, Olivier gets on television, and the story he tells this time is that it's very similar to the last story, but he says in this interview with this news station that he left his house, so very similar to the same station, and he watched them at the pancake house. So he was there while they were there at the pancake house in the car talking, and he was reporting back to Kaveh, stating to him that, oh, nothing's going on, look like they're just talking, they're not hugging, they're not kissing, they're not doing anything, they're just talking. And then he says after she left, because he says that she convinced him to get into the car, Keith, to get into the car with her and go to her house, he said he followed them to a location, and then they kept going, and then he went back home. So he said when they got to the house, which was the same story. So in the first story, he didn't really say that he had followed them there, so he knew he was there, and then he followed them. But cameras, like traffic cameras, they showed her going, and they showed him following her. And so after the murder occurred, I think it was like 2 days after the murder occurred, Olivier and his fiance got married, and they were there. Kaveh and Lee were at the wedding. She even gave her away. It was a small, close-knit, wedding, but they were there like 2 days after the father of your kids get murdered, possibly by you out at a wedding, right? So that happened after Olivier discarded Keith's body in this off-road place. I guess it was just north of the Golden Gate Bridge. He had his car cleaned, well, or he cleaned it himself. He either had it cleaned or he cleaned it, but he cleaned it with bleach. And then he sold it. Later, the guy who he sold it to would tell the police that the car smelled of bleach. So when they went to go and look at the vehicle, they did see and they did detect Keith's blood in the back of Olivier's vehicle. So right after was singing like a bird in the hopes of getting a plea deal. But this guy, the defense had a witness to kind of discredit him. And so what they did is they had an ex-girlfriend who was going to testify that he was kind of like an unsavory character, untrustworthy, and she didn't feel safe around him. Because Olivier was a mixed martial art fighter, and he was pretty good. Remember I told you a little back that he was training Tiffany and Kaveh to do mixed martial arts. And so he decides that he is going to contact his ex-girlfriend and tell her, oh, so I hear that you're going to be testifying against me. Do you think that is a good thing that you should do? I'm just kind of ad-libbing it. I'm not saying it exactly how he said it, but I'm kind of ad-libbing, but it's pretty much, do you think that's a good thing that you should do? And so she told the defense or the prosecutor, I think it was the defense. I think she told the defense. And so the prosecutor had to dump his testimony and not use him as a witness, which really hindered and hurt their case. And so he wasn't able to testify against Tiffany and Kaveh. And so they had to go through this trial without his testimony. And the defense was saying that, you know, first of all the prosecutor had to go on is the fact that they had these traces of these cell phones that kind of went together. And then on top of that, not only did Tiffany and Keith's cell phone pattern match, also Kaveh's cell phone pattern matched, leaving Tiffany's home and going to Olivier's house. And so it all was kind of matching up, but it was kind of circumstantial. They couldn't quite, the defense was like, that's not going to work. Another thing is that they did find some of Keith's blood that was in, a little bit of Keith's blood that was in Kaveh's man cave. And then they found a significant amount of gun residue that was in the garage. So the prosecutor, their stance was that Tiffany lured him back to the house. They got into a confrontation kind of at Tiffany's house. Kaveh put the gun into, it was either Kaveh, I don't forget who they thought did it, but Kaveh, I think they said Kaveh. Kaveh put the gun in Keith's mouth and shot him. But I would thought they would have found more blood if that happened like that. But regardless, when it came down to it, with the jury deliberating on their case for so long, and if I didn't mention this before, Tiffany and Kaveh were tried together. So when the jury came back, they came back with a not guilty for Tiffany. Surprising. And then they had a hung jury for Kaveh. So she got off, and he pretty much got off also, because there was a hung jury. And because the prosecutor said that unless they had some new evidence, they wasn't going to try Keith again. So here we have Tiffany got off. Her jury said that she wasn't guilty. there was two jurors who felt like that two murders got away. The two people got away with murder, which, yeah, quite possibly. So Tiffany got off. Kaveh had a hung jury, so he pretty much got off because they decided that they wasn't going to retry him. And they never tried Olivier. So justice hasn't been served, because here we have this poor young man who was brutally murdered, and no one has been brought to justice for his murder. And so it's sad. It's sad that this, and it's all because it started because Olivier's testimony could not be used. It's like, why would you contact a witness? Yes, so it's very sad. So today, Tiffany Lee is in China. She had to fight for custody of her kids, because while she was battling this case, Green's mom and her mom kind of cared for the kids mostly, because she was on house arrest for all of this time. And it took 3 years for them to bring this case back to trial. And so, at one point it was delayed because it was reported that allegedly she had a form of cancer and had to undergo treatment. So it was delayed for that. But today, Lee is back in China with her 2 kids. Keith's mom, on behalf of the estate of Keith Green, is suing the 3 of them, Tiffany, Kaveh, and Olivier, in a wrongful death lawsuit, a civil lawsuit, holding them responsible for his death. But this trial, this suit, the discovery phase of this suit keeps being delayed. And the reason that it is being delayed is because although Tiffany got off for the murder of Keith Green, if she was to speak in this civil case and incriminate herself, then the federal government can go after her on charges. Now, she could plead the 5th, which is her right to be able to do. If she did it, it'll make her look really guilty. But if she was to incriminate herself, then the federal government can go after her and bring her up on murder charges. So the federal government has a statute of limitations and where they can bring these charges up against her. And so happened that the statute of limitation expires on April of 2021. So it's coming up really soon. So if they don't go through this process and get her deposition, get her to say something, then so basically they are attempting to wait to after this date so she can't be brought up on any charges, which is pretty, So that is what's going on with Miss Tiffany the Heiress Lee. And Kaveh was released from prison. According to records, him and Tiffany are no longer together. I don't know. I didn't find much information of what he's doing. And now, if I was him, I would lay low, because they still can bring charges against him since his trial had a hung jury or whatever it was. They can still bring charges up against him if they have some new discovery of some new information. They can bring some charges up against him. And for Mr. Mr. guy, what's his name? Olivier. Hold on, let me see. I have some information on him. So for Olivier, he is, well, at least as I last looked, and I think it was sometime this summer in 2020. 2020 has been a year. But I believe that he's still in jail because what happened is that, and I think that it was Tiffany's defense attorneys that did this, is that they told, let me step back a little bit. So Olivier came to the U.S. with a fake passport. Someone totally different. His name is like Torre or something, but we're going to stick with Olivier for now. It's a story about it. But we'll stick with Olivier, but I think his name was like Torre something. And so he used a fake passport to get here. And then it makes you question, like, how was he able to come into the U.S.? Hold on, 9/11 has happened. How was he able to come into the U.S. with a fake passport? Like, what? This is still happening? But so, yes, he was trying to escape some war that was happening in Africa. And so he ran here on a fake passport. I was outdone, like, this is still happening. I still have to like take off my shoes and take off my belt at the airport, but people are still getting into the U.S. illegally. Like, what? I think that's... So anyways, I think it was Tiffany's defense, her attorneys that alluded or told on him and told the federal government, because he was about to be released. And as he was being released, the federal government came and swooped him in. So as of right now, at least as of, sometime this summer, he could either face a 10-year sentence and a deportation, to be deported from the country. And so they say he has, like, he's in this, he's held under federal charges with no chances of bail. He has all of these aliases. And so we don't know what's going to happen to him. But right now, he's not being charged with murder. He's only being charged with possessing fake documents to enter the U.S. If that's a sentence, that may not be the true charges. It's just the charges that it is what it is. And so, and that is what is happening with them. And so, I'm gonna take a quick sip of my wine before I go into the estate of the Lees. It's just amazing that you wonder, is it like money that gets people off? Is it the money? I'll tell you something that was very interesting when I read the interview notes when she was talking to the detectives. Like, when she first started the conversation, she's gonna mention something like, we gave money to the police fund, and I know such and such. Like, so she was like name dropping and mentioning that she gave to the police fund. I don't know if that had anything to do with her getting off. I wish. So out of all the jurors, I think it was 11. Don't quote me. But out of all the jurors that were on that trial, 2 spoke out, and all they said was pretty much is that 2 people got away with murder. But I think sometimes it's unfair to hear, when you don't get to hear why a juror let a person off in a case that is so highly recognized like this one. And it just makes you wonder, like, how, like, because simply put, the defense tried to make it seem like Olivier killed Keith. And it's like, but what was the motive? Why would he kill him? Other than to kill him for his friend, or to kill him because he got paid to do it. Now, even though Olivier said he didn't kill him, but he did discard the body, and $35,000 is a lot of money just to discard a body. Although I wouldn't discard no bodies, but if I was to want some money, I guess it would be maybe $35. Did y'all hear that, Belch? Can't believe I did that. Oh well. So, for Tiffany Lee's mom, we're gonna call her elderly. Elderly, not like elderly, like old, like elder. She's the elderly, L-I, elderly. So Miss Lee, Miss Elderly. So Miss Lee, she had all of these real estate holdings. She started off buying in Belgium. She bought up the real estate around this big world hotel that did a lot of business, and she bought all the real estate up in there. Then she came to the U.S. She bought a home in California, and then she started buying property here, commercial and apartment buildings here in the U.S. But what's very interesting about their real estate transactions is this. This can get a little complicated. I think I got it a bit. So what they would do is that the Miss Elder, she would own an entity, say an LLC, and she would buy a property in that LLC. She would sell that property to another LLC where the members of the second LLC was also the members of the first LLC. They would have investors invest, and they did this quite a few times. It's like keeping it in the family. But then they would have investors that would invest into these LLCs or this property buying. So what they would do is they would buy a property, and the investors would invest into this property. And when they go to sell it, the investors would get their money out. But because it was an LLC, they didn't have to say who they were and what money that they made out of that investment. So they were like, what they call them, stealth investors. And so they did this over and over. And even though they would deny, the left hand is not beating the right hand, it's very similar to it. That's exactly what it appears that they are doing. And also, the Mrs. Lee would broker the deals where she would find properties and buildings and commercial properties for Chinese investors to invest into places in the U.S. And they would say, oh, she's not doing that to get more Chinese people or, to have China own more of U.S. land, but this is how they got their money. This is how Tiffany Lee became the real estate heiress. This is why we're talking about this story. It's all very interesting. I probably will dig I probably will dig deeper into this real estate piece because it's very fascinating. It reminds me of like the what they call them, susus, the legal ones, where or even investment clubs where people would put all of their money together and they would go out and buy properties, and when they sell it they would get the money out, but it's like they kept it within a group of them. So like a good example to me would be, just say that I lived in another country and I was investing my money. I'm back home, but I'm investing my money into these U.S. companies. And when they sell them, I get my money out. I leave some in. We're going to invest, and we're going to keep doing that as a group. And that's the way it appears to me. Even though they say, oh, it's not left hand feeding right hand. And unfortunately, our laws allow it to be done that way, so that all these people could invest into real estate, take money out, and then they don't have to tell us anything about who, so they don't have to pay taxes, they don't have to do any of those things because they just have taken money out of here. And now they own all of these properties. So it's very interesting. I would love to see the statistics of how many foreigners have bought properties in the U.S. and how many non-U.S. owners of properties there are. That's very interesting to me. But back to, so, you know, if there's any updates on this trial or anything that is happening, I will definitely keep you guys updated. So thank you and goodbye. So lastly, I want to thank my sponsor. If you are a real estate professional, if you are a marketer or even a business owner and you have wanted a website, but you always find that it is so expensive to have to own a website, or you thought you want to do a sales funnel so that you can generate leads into your business, then I have the perfect software for you. It is called Groove Pages, Groove Funnels. And if you want to run a business, they have everything you need. If you want to do e-commerce, if you want to blog, if you want to build a funnel, if you want to have a website, and they have so much more. But to have the website and sales funnel is absolutely free. If you choose to upgrade, you can have a host of other benefits at one flat rate, and they have a lifetime deal that's going on. So both of the links are in the comments. So one, you can get your free website, a funnel, or two, you can upgrade and have the whole powerhouse and run all of your business through it. So I hope you get a chance to check them out. Links in the description. Comment if you have any questions, and make sure you subscribe. Thank you.